Hello and welcome to another episode of Between Two Ferns with Kate and Gav. I'm Gav, I'm the founder and CEO of Learnosity. With me today is Kate. Kate is our PM in charge of AI labs in Dublin here. Feedback Aide is a big part of Learnosity's mission to build best-in-class tech to advance learning. To deliver this enormous promise of AI in education, we established an AI labs team in Dublin. And Kate was our STEM product manager in California, moved to Dublin kindly about a year ago to help run that team. It's the second in a series of webinars to talk about some of the products coming out of the team around AI. If you haven't seen the first one, go and have a look at the Item Bank Health Check webinar we did in September. That's on YouTube. It's great to have a data science team to back all of this stuff up. So right now there's a ton of pressure on people to build out AI and ship AI features. So let's talk about that. Kate.
Yeah, I think for product teams everywhere, there's a lot of pressure to work with AI, to build with AI. And when you're getting started, it can be really tempting to just do that off of intuition, kind of just doing it off of a gut feeling. You know, you're using generative AI, it seems like it's working good, but that can be really risky when you actually go to launch those products. And so that's sort of an area where we're really thinking about taking a validated approach, really trying to take a scientific approach to using AI, because we don't want it to be just a gut feeling. It's risky there when things don't actually work as well. Your customer is going to lose confidence in what you're doing, and it really does just affect your overall AI strategy and the products that you build.
So some of you will have seen an AI webinar we did exactly 1 year ago to the day, 1 year ago now. And we were very proud, and we continue to be very proud of what we were able to launch with that. But a year, it's a long time in show business, it's an even longer time in AI. We've spent the last year hearing from our customers, understanding the needs, and building out a bunch of functionality that we're really happy to show you today. We're excited to talk about what's changed since then. So rewind a year ago, the main goal of Feedback Aide was about teachers trying to give them the weekends back, overworked teachers, time-consuming, kind of complex essays. Wanted to speed up the grading for that kind of formative assessment piece, generally for homework, generally in education. But we also wanted to raise the quality of feedback. We're kind of broadening the lens now. The word aid, of course, wasn't just picked out of a hat. Technology designed to assist and empower a human grader, not to replace them, right? So the teacher or the reviewer always has the final say, always rubber stamps. That kind of human in the loop approach is absolutely critical. So over the past year, we've been expanding the functionality in AI in Feedback Aide. These capabilities. So stay tuned for these demos we're going to show you today. Firstly, we have short answer questions. It's by far the most requested feature. We have a bunch of assistive grading tools to help speed up the process, let alone the actual grading itself, and a bunch of agentic stuff as well that will help on that, and we'll bring you through some of these demos. AI Labs team has also spent the last year boosting the accuracy of the tools. We're surfacing those stats to share with our customers, and what we end up with here is an AI grading engine that helps product teams ship faster grading without sacrificing any quality or control. So today we're talking about this scientific approach leads to a big change. We're talking about a leap into high stakes from where we started informative. This is an evolution, and it was a really helpful tool for kind of homework and practice and formative assessments. And now it's a total powerhouse that can handle high stakes summative assessments, some serious assessments here. So why is this critical? It's because basically the dirty little secret of human grading is also it's often loose, it's often flawed, and we're now at the point where we think that AI grading and Feedback Aide is good enough for this high stakes summative leap, and we're confident that you can use it to increase accuracy of even your highest stakes exams and decrease the time it takes to grade those, and as such your costs. We're going to share a little bit of the research we've been doing, revealing how accurate Feedback Aide is, and really Feedback Aide is built on three core ideas. Firstly, it's embeddable. It's API first. It's designed to be part of your product. It slots into your UI and your workflow. That makes it embeddable. Secondly, it's agentic. So it's a whole team, a whole slew of specialized AI agents that are doing different tasks, grading things, looking at topics, language, and so on. And it's flexible. It can work with any rubric, short answer, long answer, analytic rubrics, holistic, and so on. Anything you can throw at it will work. So with all that said, let's dive into the demos. So the first one we're going to show you is a short answer text question. So this here is about the sinking of the Titanic. Now, previously, we were limited to what kind of questions you could put in front of a student because of the need to grade it. So you're kind of limiting to 1 or 2 words, or you're trying to pick alternate spellings or phrasings and that kind of stuff. Here you're letting AI do that hard work. So the question is, what was it about the Titanic sinking in 1912 that made it one of the most famous ships in history? So the correct response is it was unsinkable, and seemingly unsinkable, and it was his first voyage. Now there's some other valid responses here, so we click on that. There's some other ones in here. It was hit by an iceberg, it was a shipwreck, there was lack of preparedness involved, lots of people died, big and luxurious, and so on. So there's alternate reasonable answers here that should get the point. And then there's some answers that are incorrect or just not enough for the point here. Just that it sank, just that it was big, just that it was luxurious or hit an iceberg. So now we can go and we can generate that feedback and we can score that question, and it will look at the whole sentence and look at the meaning behind that. So it correctly identifies that's a correct answer right now. In response to, there's a kind of answer in there about the movie, it talks about Rose and Jack. So it goes and generates that feedback now. Of course, it says that that's an incorrect answer. And in 3, it goes back to correct answers here as well. Now, what you're doing is here, you're freeing somebody to write questions properly, not limited by how they can be graded. And that's the big exciting part of this. So there's other types of short answer questions. I mean, it seems that that's it for short answer questions. It's actually not. When you start looking at the question types, you start realizing the different types of short answer questions are there. So we're going to bring you through those. Kate, let's talk about Categorize.
Yeah, so when we talk to our customers and just the experience that we have in assessment, we know that there's different marking schemes that you might have. There's different sort of types of questions that you have, and they're not always just going to be sort of correct, incorrect. They're a little more complex. So in this example, what we can see, there's a question here. It's a scenario. There's some information that's given about a student, and the question saying, look at these traits and figure out, which of them describe Jada and which of them don't. So the student has to go through, they have to classify them, they're categorizing them. You can imagine different types of questions you might be having to sort data. And we can see our rubric here on the right. It lists which ones describe Jada, which ones don't. Those are the 2 categories. And again, we can go and we can generate this score. It's going to do that score for us. So it's scoring that response. But what's really great is that's also we're generating feedback that can be then given to the learner. And this is actionable feedback, letting them know maybe where they went wrong, where they can improve. In this case, right, not only do we get this score, okay, you got a 6 out of 8, but messy, as an example, was incorrectly placed as a trait that does describe Jada, and they know why. It's like, well, it talked about her cleaning and all that sorts of things. So not only do you get that score, but you also get that feedback, which is so helpful.
And the response here is completely free form, right? So they could have written like, Jada is helpful, Jada is kind, Jada is messy. It doesn't matter what that is.
Exactly.
It's completely free form. And it's analyzing the whole thing and taking the categories from there.
Yeah, so it really takes in all that flexibility that you need, right? Because people write things in different ways and they shouldn't get penalized for that. And it's a much better learning experience if it is free form and they can come up with the response instead of just selecting it, from a list.
Could have been a table, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's look at key points.
Yeah, so another type of question that we have is going to be around key points. So there might be one general solution, but you want to either give maybe partial credit for steps along the way, or there's just a few key points that you want to highlight that you want to make sure they're in that solution. So this example we see, this is a math style question. So in that case, they're asked a question, was Jasmine correct? She made some claim about the cost of her rideshare, but they're also asked to show their work and explain their reasoning. So we're going to take this full solution and we can highlight, well, one of the key parts is we want to make sure they actually use this cost equation to actually come up with the cost, but then they also need to make sure they explain, their answer and provide some justification. So you can call both of those out in your rubric here.
So super exciting. We're showing a math question here. Of course, this can be any kind of any type of question that has to have a couple of key points, right?
Exactly, yeah. So math makes sense because often that is kind of step by step, but there's going to be a lot of scenarios where there are just a few, key statements or key pieces of information that you want to make sure are assessed. And if they don't hit all of them, you still want to give them some credit. So this adds for more flexibility in that way.
Now, there are going to be some questions here where it's not just these points. We need all of these 3 points in the question. You want kind of here, there's 12 valid points and I want you to make 4 of those points.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in this example, right, we're saying, they need to hit these 2 points. That's those are the key parts of it. But there's going to be scenarios where there's just maybe 10 possible answers and I only need you to pick out 1 or 2. So that was something we came up with. We have a question type that supports that. What I'll show you, which is exciting, is I'll actually show you that inside of the Learnosity authoring and assessment tools. So we're launching this next week. So a little bit of a sneak peek, but we are integrating the AI scoring functionality within the essay question type. So in this case, it says identify 3 distinct factors, and you can hear we're saying score with feedback aid, and I can then find which rubric I want. So this is this new style that we're talking about that allows you to pick, a few correct answers from a longer list. So it's saying, okay, you need 3 points, and there are, a few additional correct responses. In this case, the rubric says, there are 6 valid points. The student's only going to need to identify 3, and we've built this rubric editor into our authoring tool.
So before we were selling Feedback Aid just as a standalone product, now it's completely integrated into the system.
Yeah, so now you can really easily take advantage of that AI scoring for short response style questions within our tool. You can imagine then delivering that test. You'll see, they can use our essay question type to actually type in their response. They're going to have access, to our different formatting tools. And then once they've submitted that test, they're going to get that report. You can see how they performed. And so it's seamlessly embedded inside of the Learnosity APIs.
So it's the same as it was graded like a multiple choice question or anything else.
Exactly.
You're seeing it in all the reports.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's the short answer responses, short response questions, and there's 4 different types of those, and they're available now as part of Learnosity, or will be next week, as part of Learnosity embedded and available standalone as well.
Exactly.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about the longer essay stuff and the different types of rubrics. So the first one here is a holistic rubric. This is where, in this case, you can grade from a 0 to a 4. And there's just 1 score you're given. One thing to point out here is there's a question. There's also a source material here. So it's a short question, and then there's a few pages of source material that the question is asking about. And you're able to now embed that source material into the question so it kind of grades it appropriately based on that. And you have a holistic rubric there, which gives, in this case, a 1 out of 4 in there, and also gives feedback to the learner and that kind of overall feedback there. Now that's as distinct to an analytic rubric. So let's talk about what analytic rubrics are.
Great. So with the holistic rubric, you're just saying overall, how do they perform? But what's great with an analytic rubric is you can actually call out individual traits, and then you can assign a score to those. So in this example, we have 4 traits that we want assessed. There's organization, the thesis, evidence, and reasoning. And so we can go through and outline, on each individual trait, how are they performing? It's going to be a much more in-depth analysis, and it's also going to be better tailored feedback for how they're performing. And so these analytic rubrics are great. This is what we launched with initially. One thing that we've added in is the ability to add additional sort of grading guidance or additional context into that rubric. So you can see here in this case, we had our 4 criteria, but there's perhaps some additional information that is really relevant to the scoring, but might not sort of neatly fit in those 4 categories. So one of those here, this first one says, do not deduct points from grammar, spelling, or formatting unless it really, impedes your understanding of maybe their thesis or something like that. So it's letting, the system know that we don't care about, grammar and spelling in this case. And so this is something that we added in, actually working with graders and being involved in some of these exams and sort of witnessing how that worked. There is a rubric that's on paper, there's a rubric that's published, but there was all this additional information that they were given, whether it was in their training or whether it was just additional scoring notes. And without that information, the scoring's not going to be as accurate because it's not really seeing the whole picture of what the human marker actually knows.
And the bigger learning here is that basically if we can give the AI enough context, it will grade accurately and consistently.
Yeah.
And more so than a human.
Yeah, and the key thing there, right, is it does need all that information. So having well-written rubrics is going to be really key.
Cool. Of course, we can use AI to do that. So how do we deal with level and style?
Yeah, that's a good point too. In this case, right, we're adding in just some additional context into the rubric, but we do offer additional configuration options, basically settings that you can set so you can make sure that the appropriate grader level is noted. That's going to impact like the score, but also the feedback. So making sure the feedback is relevant to that person's learner level. And we also have some additional controls that you can set around how harsh the grading is, whether you want it to be perhaps lean more strict or maybe take a more balanced approach. So those are additional levers that we offer all around making sure that the scoring aligns with what you're expecting.
Super. So moving on, let's talk about languages here. The beauty of building on LLMs is that they're language independent. There's kind of, 40-something languages we have here. Here you have a French response and a French rubric giving French feedback. And you can kind of mix and match that. You can have a French response with a Spanish rubric or English feedback or whatever. So huge opportunities here in the language learning space.
Yeah, exactly. There's a big opportunity here as far as, in this case, just taking it in different languages, but you can imagine you need to write your response in a language that you're learning, but then you want the feedback in your native language so that you can really understand it appropriately. So having that combination is going to be really helpful.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the agents, some of the agentic approach that we're taking. So the first one, I suppose, is language, right? So knowing that it can take a French response, here the student's been asked a question in English and they've answered it in French, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I think they maybe in Spanish, but anyways.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that's the point, right? So if the student's expected to enter their response in English and they enter a response in a different language, we can easily detect that and flag it for you. And that's great to save you time. You're not like having to read through these responses, but you can also use this to maybe route it to a certain person or just flag it appropriately.
Send it back to the student.
Yeah. So having these quick checks is going to be really helpful, just more efficiency in the workflows.
Okay, so talking more about these quick checks, there's an off topic. What we found when we started digging into data sets here was we'd find kind of gibberish answers or off topic answers that humans were grading pretty well, right? We were finding stuff that the AI would give it a 0 and the human is giving it a 4 out of 5 because it looks like a right answer. It looks like well structured English. The first couple of sentences maybe are on topic and the rest of it's just kind of gibberish. So adding in here an off topic check. So again, you can identify that really, really quickly and not mistakenly grade somebody really well for doing that.
Yeah, we also learned that in some instances, if it is really off topic, you don't want to grade it for something like spelling or organization because you just want to flag it as a 0. And so it's just making sure that, again, it aligns to what you're expecting.
Yeah, because I mean, in theory, you could put a completely off topic thing, get 4 out of 5 for spelling and whatever else.
But it wasn't the question,
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Okay, so moderation and kind of concerning content. We have here, and we talked about this last time, that we have AI agent here that will go and do checks. We find this in data sets, unfortunately, where you have all sorts of problems coming up with student content that really needs to be flagged. Which we're flagging for hate speech, threats of violence, violent or sexual content, and promotion or disclosure of self-harm. So I think it's really important to have AI in there because it's pretty easy to kind of miss one of these kind of blatant real cries for help there, which is a horrible thing if a teacher had missed that and God forbid something happens. So having AI in there to do that is really important.
It is, and you can see in this example, it is a really long response. And maybe you read the first few paragraphs, it seemed good, you scored it, you moved on. But there are some sentences in there that are deeper in the essay that are really concerning and mention, a cry for help. So flagging that to the person who's marking this, you can acknowledge it and still get the grade. In some instances, if it's not self-harm, but it's, language that's maybe violence, maybe that was appropriate for your subject, but making sure that it is really clear to whoever's marking it that there's something that you really want to look back at here.
Okay, so what else are we doing? We're looking at structure.
Yeah, so one thing that we've added in as far as these additional checks that really, add to the scoring is thinking about the structure when it comes to paragraphs. Maybe you have a requirement like in this demo that the response needs to have at least 3 paragraphs. So if they don't meet that, they're not going to get credit. So in this case, we can see, there's only 2 paragraphs here. We also know, right, there's maybe it's not super clear what counts as a paragraph. Maybe the student just types different lines. So you can, if you want, you can specify, okay, in this scenario, I want at least 30 words. I want at least 50 words. I have a minimum word count as well in my paragraphs. And so again, it's all about efficiency and it's all about better scoring.
And we're also checking for kind of structure when it comes to kind of citations, bibliographies.
Yeah, so if I go to this next demo here, you'll see in this case, we have two ways that we're looking at citations. So you could think, okay, there are inline citations. So maybe you're quoting something, you need to reference that bibliography. And there's also thinking about the number of, total references in that bibliography in that works cited. So in this demo, it said there was a requirement that they had to have at least 3 inline citations in their response. And we can see here, they don't have any. They do have enough paragraphs, so that's good. So they passed on that setting, but they're not hitting this citation check.
They have a shorter bibliography than was needed. Okay, so what else are we doing with citations?
Yeah, so one thing here in that demo, right, we're just looking at how many citations there were. But there's a lot more to that. We've been thinking about, the quality of those citations. And so this is an area that we're going into. This is something that we're launching really soon. This is going to be assistive tools that are going to help that grader understand, key elements of the student's response. So it's not necessarily just the scoring that we're focusing on here, but it's giving that grader, that reviewer, more information. So when it comes to citations, what we can see here in purple is that for each of these citations that we see, we're going to get some information about the associated entry in that works cited. So in this case, I can see, okay, this, references a Wikipedia article. Maybe I ask the students for more academic journals, so I kind of get a quick sense without digging into the works cited, what type that is. If I go view another one, this is saying, okay, actually there's no matching bibliography here, and it's giving me this information, it's highlighting it to me, it's making it really easy for me to understand that, which could be really important if that essay does mention, or maybe there's requirements around how you cite things, the quality of your sources and pieces like that.
So this is a series of functionality here that's around the explainability and kind of time-saving element
exactly.
of an essay. We're finding kind of long, unstructured essays. You might miss the thesis, you might miss the evidence, you might miss some of the citations.
Yeah, and a lot of times, the thesis is really important. So maybe you want to look at it first. So we're saying, here it is, getting to you there faster and providing you some information on that.
And perhaps it could be buried in the last paragraph.
Yeah, and saving you some time,
Yeah.
So thesis, evidence, citations, those are a few of the things we're starting with, but we're open to learning more what people want to see in the essays and pulling out that information.
So what else are we doing in terms of that kind of time-saving piece?
Yeah, so another area has to do with providing confidence in how we're scoring. So this is an approach where we're doing a sort of multi-pass approach, and then we're going to provide a confidence score with each value that we're providing. So that's functionality that we have. We are thinking about different ways that we could maybe highlight that to the user. So here's one option that you're seeing where we're just flagging that in the use of evidence score, it was given a 4, and we're saying that score didn't meet our confidence threshold. Maybe there are other ways that we'll show this to the grader to say, it's leaning 4 or 5 to kind of give them some information. So we have that technology in to provide confidence scores, and we're working out some few ways to show it. So that is one thing that's helpful. Again, one thing that could be really impactful, it might just give you an eye to kind of make sure you review that one. But you could also imagine in high stakes scenarios or in these really large grading operations, you want to be able to route certain essays to certain people. Maybe that one gets flagged that it needs to be double marked. Maybe it gets passed off to some sort of chief or lead reader. So having those confidence scores in there is going to be really beneficial to that.
Great.
So that's one part of it, confidence score. But another thing we heard is, I want to know why that score was given. And so that's another layer of explainability we have here is you can actually view a justification for the score that Feedback Aide is giving. So if we go in to look at use of evidence, that was ranked a 4, I can actually see, why Feedback Aide give that. It's also going to pull out some pieces, some evidence from the essay that align with the score that they gave.
So before we've been speaking about kind of feedback to the student. Here it's a justification. It's an explanation to the grader to kind of go, oh, I can see why that aligns with the rubric.
Exactly, because we said, the human in the loop, right? They're here, they're going to confirm that score, and if they're going to do that, they need to know, see what they're confirming. So it gives them more confidence, right? When they go and say, 4 looks right, I'm going to approve that. This is why.
And even showing a kind of predictive score with confidence really helps speed up the process here and highlight certain areas.
Exactly.
You still letting the human do it, but you're kind of speeding them up. Okay, so we've been doing a lot of scoring. This isn't new to us. Last year we delivered 22 billion questions, about probably half of them were auto-scored. and we're working on the other half, right? So let's talk about some of the math stuff that we have been doing, because I think there's some overlap here.
Yeah, so last year we released our multi-step math question. That's what you see here in this demo. And that was a great area for us to let students actually input their entire solution and not just an answer, and then to get feedback that's more specific based off of their whole solution. But we knew when we did that, we were also asking students to type in a lot more math, and that can take a little bit away from that learning moment where you're trying to think about your solution. So we entered in the ability to actually take photos of handwritten math and then have that be embedded in. So you can actually go, I'm just going to reload this demo. So you can go in, and in the keypad, you're going to see the ability to take a photo. So I solved this problem earlier. I have it on a piece of paper. If I want, I can take a photo of that either with my device's camera, or if I had a phone, I could use a QR code. So different ways of input. You can see my camera is going to pop up here. I can, take this in, and then I will capture it. What it's going to do is you can see it's converted it in. I have a quick preview, and then when I'm happy, I can just accept it. And what's great is the student can still, tweak any of these things if they need to. They have access to our keypad. It's getting it there a lot faster. They can check their work.
Wait, you're a PhD in math here. You got it wrong?
It looks like maybe I got it wrong, or maybe it's a good demo. We'll never know. But the good thing, right, I got that quick feedback. If I was a student, right, I'd go in, I would fix that. I can check my answer again. So we know people still, they write with pen and paper. They have that work. We're trying to make it easier for them to digitize. We did that in the math space. So we're like, why not do that for feedback aid too?
Great.
So that's an area where we'll show you a demo here.
So we have an API here. This is just a really simple kind of UI to show, but like a back-end data API here to be able to accept some of those images and then do the OCR on that and then pass it through.
Exactly.
Feedback.
We have that tech to take, your handwritten math and convert it. So here, this is just showing how we might do that within feedback aid. So this was a short response from a student. They just wrote it on paper, and we're uploading that, and then it's going to get passed to feedback aid, and it could still be scored. And we can go back and we could preview the image if we needed to, just to make sure, right, that did align.
Fantastic. And of course, that will work again for math as well. We saw some of the earlier math questions.
Yeah. And so we can think about feedback aid, handwritten math as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so what else do we have on the roadmap? What are we working on?
Yeah, so we just mentioned handwriting recognition. That's thinking about responses that were originally on paper. We're also thinking about other types of responses. So you might have an audio question type or a video question type where you've recorded your response, being able to score that with feedback aid. And then also venturing into more different types of, not handwritten, just responses that are essays, but thinking about maybe drawings or diagrams or graphs, a little more open-ended, but being able to grade those as well with feedback aid.
Looking, of course, as well at using RAG to align some of the scoring and the feedback into the existing learning materials that the students have used. You saw the annotations for teachers or for graders, where it's kind of highlighting parts of the essay. The idea being that we can now, we're looking at doing the student-facing version of that and giving that kind of inline feedback and in annotations. Also tailoring that feedback, configurable tone and style, and kind of generally moving towards more authentic assessment, more project-based work, more multiple page, like 20-page PDFs or PowerPoints, Excel, code, accepting different types of things and going at that with feedback aid.
Exactly.
So we touched on all this before, but it sounds really impressive, but where is the proof and how do we know it actually works?
Yeah, great point. So as we mentioned, the AI Labs team, a big part of that is our data science team, who's going to go through and evaluate the work that we've done. So first, to talk a bit about short response, right? That was a newer type of question type that we support. So for short response, what we did, first we want to make sure we have an appropriate representative data set. So we looked at different subjects. So in chemistry and physics and math, looking at the sciences, also looking at English, geography, history, medicine. So we have a range of questions here. They're different question types. So there's different rubrics that you saw, whether it's just a general, correct, incorrect, or maybe it has key points or valid points. So building up a big data set that's really representative, and they all have, a true score assigned. And then we can validate, how does feedback aid do against that, that true score. So we have an accuracy of 96% for our general short response question types.
So how do we increase that? 96% is great,
Yeah.
but how do we increase that?
So one thing that when we dig into these, when we look at those failures, we see sometimes there's actually a misalignment between the rubric and the question, and the rubric might not actually have all of those details that maybe the human marker was going against. And so I think an area for us is making sure we're giving guidance, like the best guidance on how to write rubrics, or we're helping people generate rubrics in different ways, because that's probably where we're going to get that best improvement is really it's better aligned rubrics.
So we're doing the evaluation right now on the questions and data that we've been given by our friends and by our clients. And if you have any more call to action here, everybody, if you have data sets of this, please let us know. We'd love to work on it. But they're generally, by definition, they're human. They're human. They're rubrics designed for humans, and they've been graded by humans. If we have AI that's going to do the evaluation, we can write a better rubric that's more verbose, that has more content in it, and that will increase the 96%.
Yeah, and what's also great is through Analytic Health Check, what we're looking at is helping people convert maybe existing multiple choice questions. So without AI scoring of short response, you might not have done an open-ended question type, so you just went to MCQ, and now we're going to actually convert a multiple choice question. We'll convert it to an open-ended question that has that rubric also built. And so that way you're getting well-written rubrics and also getting there a lot faster through Analytic Health Check.
And so with multiple point questions, the rest of the short answer question types, we have a quick score of 0.86.
Yes.
So let's talk about what a quick score is and how to break that out.
Yeah, so a quick score, quadratic weighted kappa, that's a metric that's used to measure the agreement between two scores. So we're thinking about how feedback aid scored versus how the human markers scored and whether or not they align. So you can imagine if I gave something a 10 and you gave it a 9, like we disagreed, but we were pretty close. But if I gave it a 10 and you gave it a 2, that would be really concerning as far as those two scores. So the quick score, it allows you to capture that discrepancy that's there. And this is a metric that's also used just when thinking about, grading just different, big courses, how good a grader does. If they have higher than a 0.8 on a quick score, that's an expert level grading. 0.6 to 0.8, that's an average grader, that's still substantial agreement. And then when you get lower than 0.6, that's going to be a poorer grader. There's going to be more misalignment.
Okay, so let's talk about the scores the feedback aid is getting in terms of quick scores. So over time, we've had two models. We've had a standard model and an advanced model. The standard model was there. It's designed to be kind of more a cheaper model for kind of lower stakes stuff. It delivers a very credible 0.73 quick score, but lower than the advanced model. We're actually abandoning this model now, and we're just delivering the advanced model. We'll talk about pricing of that in a moment, but we're basically merging the standard and advanced. So going forward, you're going to see this kind of incremental improvements in this quick score. It jumped recently from a 0.82 to a 0.84. It's a huge leap, but there's not that much further to go, right? Also, we should note that this is kind of based on kind of one pass of the advanced model. This isn't any of the agentic work, any of checking of the topics, or kind of ensemble approach with multiple passes or multiple agents working on it. It's just one pass at the question, and it's getting a 0.84, which is pretty great, and we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
But we're expecting quick scores to be kind of better over time, with especially with that agentic approach, but just generally marginally incrementally improving over time. So we're looking then to externally validate that. In-house testing isn't enough for us. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, so we have our own data science team, and they do rigorous testing, but it's always great to have that outside opinion. And so we partnered with Dr. Sarah Ratner, the University of Oxford, and she did a really big evaluation of feedback aids models. So she looked over 17,000 student essays and did her own analysis and testing, and came to the same agreement we did around that high level of agreements, that expert level agreements that you're seeing for the advanced model. And she also had some really great takeaways when she was doing that analysis, that when she was looking at the analytic rubrics that have, those multiple criteria, that it was the criteria that were often, higher order thinking or more complex ones. That was where feedback actually aided the best. So that's also great to see. Yeah, so that was one opportunity. There's been others as well. We actually, if you're interested in getting access to these papers, we'll have a quick survey at the end. You can get those then. This was another study that was done. These were people from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. They analyzed the feedback aid advanced model, but also I think 5 or 6 other models as well. And they came to see that, yes, it does score really well. So it's great to have this external validation.
Go Spartans.
Go Spartans. So that's great. It's great, obviously, to have the statistics. It's great to have that validation. But at the end of the day, what's really important, right, is the impact that it's making on teachers or on students. So it's great to see one of our customers, Penn Foster. They're using Feedback Aid in their online courses. The way that they've implemented is actually giving instant feedback to that student before they actually submit it to the teacher. So you can imagine you've done your first draft of your essay. Feedback Aid gives you, a predictive score, and it gives you some feedback. You improve it. You can go ahead and go through that cycle yourself in a much faster way. And then the quality of the work that they're actually submitting is a lot higher. And so they're seeing that the essay return rates where teachers before were having to send it back to the students saying, this is off topic, this wasn't there, you didn't hit the mark, that had dropped from 44% down to 5%. So it's great to see some real world impact on Feedback Aid.
So let's talk about the pricing now. When we brought out Feedback Aid this time last year, we had 2 models: standard, which was 1 cent per essay, and advanced, which was 5 cents per essay. Kind of game-changing pricing, really getting down to a really good scale price right out of the bat, and not kind of working our way there. Here we are now updating this pricing. We've taken the advanced model and we've slashed the price by 80%. It's 1 cent an essay. It's worth every penny, as we say. And that's like, if you think about it, that's 1 million essays for 10 grand. And that's pretty compelling, we think. Short responses, they're 1 cent as well. And the advanced agentic model is 1 cent with 1 cent per agent, and we've grouped those agents into kind of different different groupings, and we can obviously talk in a bit of detail about that when we need to. We also have a bespoke model. As we move into the higher stakes arena, you kind of throw the kitchen sink at it. You deliver a custom solution for each question. You run that kind of ensemble approach. You run many agents at it. You do multiple passes to the same thing with different LLMs and so on. That's the sort of thing we'll do with that kind of custom bespoke approach. And we'll do that for the kind of where it really, really matters, and generally where you're kind of augmenting a kind of paid human grader there. So all this brings to kind of one final thought. When for so long the sheer workload of grading has been a bottleneck, and it's limited what educators could possibly even dream of assigning as homework. It's kind of a poverty of what's possible. If we remove that bottleneck, what's possible? What can we do for learning itself? How can we change assessment? How can we make it much more authentic? How can we assign much better project work? Whatever it is, getting somebody to record a video, do our own podcast, do coding, do longer essays, do PowerPoints, whatever. That was kind of generally going to be too difficult for an average teacher to be able to kind of grade in their spare time. And now it's kind of opening up these possibilities. So kind of, I believe it ushers in a new era in education. The question for all of us is how we can use this to make learning faster and fairer and better for all students. So it's super exciting in that way. So with that, look, we love solving the problems. We love to hear from you with your own data sets of what you're doing here. We love that data. We want to dig right into it. So please send it on to us. You can reach out to me at gavin@learnosity.com and Kate at kate@learnosity.com. And with that, we'll take some questions. I see some coming through here. Will there be a function to turn open response to more structured multiple choice questions? It must be from multiple choice questions, I guess.
Yeah, so our approach with Aide Health Check was to look at a multiple choice question and then convert that into something that is open response. So right, that way the student's not just selecting an answer, but they're actually going through and having to come up with the answer themselves, but also generating the appropriate short response rubric so that it has the right short response question there. So that's the approach we're taking. We think that having more open-ended questions is a great learning opportunity.
How do you maintain and upgrade the AI grading system? Is the AI able to be used within a school's content filter? Some schools might have stricter content filters compared to others.
So how do we update our models?
Yeah.
I mean, anytime we're going to make any change to our system, we always want to make sure we do thorough testing. So that's going to be going back and thinking about, the full data sets that we have. If we need to make an update, going back and testing and making sure there's no regressions and we keep that high quality. In those cases, maybe not, we'd look at those more bespoke cases. Maybe we do something a little more tailored for that customer. So we do have some opportunities there and have a more of a bespoke offering, like you said. So
I'm talking about the school's content filter. So generally it's going out to us and our servers and we're handling what we're doing there. So it doesn't really matter if whatever LLM might be blocked in a school. We're from a server-to-server approach going in to do that. So yes, it will work in schools' content filters. Is Feedback Aide built on a large language model? Tell us which one. No. So what we're doing here is we have multiple data sets and we're running through as many data sets as we can through multiple models to work out what's good for what. So we might find that science questions are better on Gemini and math questions are better on GPT-5 or whatever. And then we can redirect those things to different LLMs as we see fit. We'll also find with the agentic approach that some agents, the content filtering, the topic checker might work with different LLMs. So we're using a multiple LLM approach here, and we're reevaluating each of them as they come through. And generally, we'll run through a bunch of essays and a bunch of scores and seeing how the LLM and different prompting techniques will work with that. I think will the data be used to train our models?
No, we don't use anyone's data to train models. We just use it to test. So it's really just verifying that we have a good agreement between the scores that are there and the scores that we're seeing. So there's no training involved. It's just testing.
And how do we check for fairness in Feedback Aide, thinking of high stakes usage?
Thinking about fairness, one thing that comes to mind is making sure you have the right, data that you're testing against to make sure that the responses are representative of, the test takers that are going to be there. So I think the quality of the data that you test against is really going to make sure that it is fair from that perspective. But then also, if you're in a high stakes scenario, there are still going to be potentially, humans reviewing that as well. So it's not just potentially an AI solution on its own, right? But there's different ways that we can work through that, and we've discussed that with people. What's the best way to approach that, depending on the question and depending on the data that we're seeing, as far as the accuracy and all of that.
Yeah, and we're finding as well that we can use there's different techniques of testing it multiple times to try and we showed the kind of confidence in different scores there of having AI check AI as well, which is a pretty interesting approach. It ends up being a lot more fair and a lot more accurate than a human grade, but again, we're talking about a human in the loop here in most cases. Okay, well, with that, thank you so much for your time, everybody. Please reach out if you have any further questions. We will be sending out a survey after this, and we will send out the link, YouTube link to this webinar when it's done. But reach out if you have a data set, you want to look at it, if you want to chat some more about it, or if you want to see some of those papers that those academic papers we've been working on. Thanks very much.